Before we start the video, I recently created a YouTube membership for my channel. You can be a member by hitting the join button next to the subscribe button under the video. I have a level you can join at as low as 99 cents. By becoming a YouTube member, you get cool badges, and when you comment on my videos, I see it all the time, and I will respond and heart your comment. I also have a Patreon out there too, so whichever service is more comfortable for you, you can join. I really appreciate every single one of you, and I will continue to make you proud. Thank you all, and let's start the video.
Welcome to the world of Tales from the Trip.
This trip happened about 2 years ago, and up until about a year ago, it still made me very anxious to think about. I had taken acid 2 times before this incident, both great trips. This one, however, was the complete opposite and showed me a glimpse of how scary LSD can be. It started out with me and 2 of my friends who we'll call C and K. We had gotten this LSD from an unknown source because our usual guy had bailed on us an hour before we planned a trip, which prompts the introduction of another couple of friends to join us, M, B, J, and P. M was responsible for obtaining the LSD, which she claimed to be about 250-ish UG, since she told us she had taken tabs from the same batch about a month ago. We were pretty safe in use, making sure our drugs were good, and tried to know how much we took every time. Everyone besides J, who was our trip sitter, took a tab and waited for the trip to begin. We were staying at C's house, which was vacant besides us because his parents were gone for the weekend. After about a half hour, we wanted Jay to take us to the gas station and get some snacks. He decided it would be best if only 1 or 2 people went, so I decided to join him while everyone else stayed back. I started to come up on the car ride there, which Jay understood and helped me enhance the trip by putting on slow and reverb Childish Gambino. I went into the gas station and enjoyed all of the lights and got slightly anxious, but grabbed a bag of chips and a Bang energy drink. I proceeded to eat the entire bag of chips and drank the Bang on our maybe 5-minute car ride home. This is what did me in. I got back to C's house to everyone beginning to come up, and it felt like I was walking into a football game, up after halftime. Everyone was laughing and having a good time, and walking into such a great atmosphere, I couldn't imagine the night doing anything but get better. I was wrong. I started to get anxious after I realized how hard I was tripping, and started to think about how my parents would react if they saw me now. Stupid 17-year-old brain. C suggested we listen to some music because he could sense I was becoming anxious. As I laid down on C's futon with my beats on, my stomach began to hurt, but I tried to ignore it as I listened to the music. I closed my eyes and blacked out. As I sunk into the depths of my mind, I remember really bright lights, a life flight helicopter appearing above C's house with the roof of the house missing. I could feel myself rising with the stretcher that the paramedics strapped me to. Over and over I was strapped down and lifted into the helicopter. I finally got into the helicopter and we took off. I could feel the helicopter rattling and shaking violently as we cruised away. I was so scared, but then I was back at C's house, outside this time, with M, K, and B. I was sitting in a patio chair looking straight up. My stomach still hurt, and as I gazed into the night sky, I suddenly stood up and blurted out, "Why does my stomach hurt?" M, K, and B did their best to calm me down and escorted me back down to the basement. I was still freaking out. I had no real idea of what was going on. I laid back on the futon again and sunk deeper into my mind. I imagined myself running, and I looked behind me and saw 2 cops and a dog chasing me. The imaginary policeman eventually tased me. Everything felt so real, I felt like I was running for my life, and when the taser hit me, I could feel the electricity running through my body and making my teeth chatter uncontrollably. And then I was running again, and tased again. Over and over, this played in my head. When I finally snapped out of it, I was in a full-on panic attack. I thought that I was dying and that the cops were at C's house to help me or arrest me. The rest of the night was a blur to me. I remember walking up and down the stairs multiple times and everyone doing their best to keep me calm and relaxed, but it didn't work. Jay sat with me as long as he could before I would eventually get up and wander off somewhere else. Everyone was kind of separated throughout the house, which I think elevated the bad trip. I couldn't figure out why everyone was being so nice to me. Every time I saw someone, they would ask if I was okay and give me reassurance that everything was okay. This just made me even more sure I was dying. At one point, I walked into the room everyone was in, except Jay, and sat down. I thought because Jay wasn't there that the cops were checking the house and Jay was walking them through it. When I thought the cops got to the other room, across from us, I tried to act as normal as possible to not give the imaginary cops a reason to arrest me. M told me later that I had a ginormous, almost sinister smile across my face. Jay later told me throughout the night he would try to calm me down by telling me that I had taken LSD, even going as far as writing it down and showing me the paper. I couldn't comprehend that during the trip. I kept yelling every couple of minutes, "Can someone please tell me what's going on?" And I would go up to the windows in the basement that you cannot see out of and say, "Where are the cops at?" I eventually laid down with C on the ground beside me and imagined my heart stopping inside of a hospital room with nurses and my family surrounding my dead body. My family was crying and I felt so small and futile as I imagined my family heartbroken over my death. I finally came to laying in C's futon exclaiming, "I don't want to die," and C grabbing me telling me, "You took acid, you're tripping, it's okay, you're not dying." I ran over to his trash can and threw up 3 times. I sat back down and talked with C about what happened while everyone else was outside watching the sunrise. I felt horrible, but having such good friends through this definitely helped me to not get out of hand. I still love taking shrooms, and I took acid another time and enjoyed it, but it will most likely be a long time before I drop acid again. I hope my story shows that even when set and setting is right, things can still go wrong, especially with someone who thought 2 acid trips were enough to consider themselves a psychonaut. Never again will I underestimate such a powerful drug. A couple of years ago, I decided to take a tab of acid one night after a 10-hour shift with my buddy who we'll call Steve and his friend who we'll call Mike. Mind you, I am very experienced with LSD and other psychedelic substances. However, I wasn't prepared for this. So it's about 11 p.m. and we're all tripping balls. I begin to realize my head is killing me because I hadn't slept in a while, and in addition, Steve and Mike are stressing me out because they keep rambling about stupid and offensive things that I can't necessarily remember. So this begins to set the mood for the rest of the trip. At some point, Mike has to use the bathroom, but the toilet was apparently broken, so Mike proceeded to take a literal shit in front of Steve's apartment. This is when I realized I'm hanging around lowlifes. Naturally, I attempt to distance myself from them, but to no avail because I have nowhere else to go, and I am in a dangerous part of the city. Eventually, I sit on the couch and focus on my breathing to try to calm down, but I was offered a 1/4 gram dab and I couldn't turn it down. Big mistake. Now I'm tripping absolute balls, yet I can't enjoy it because of my restless state and the dumbasses I am with. Eventually, Steve runs to his car and is attempting to drive, so I keep pulling him away, and I get punched in the face in the process. But I don't feel it, probably because of the sheer adrenaline. He lets up, and we proceed to head back to the apartment. I was over it. I wanted out. The insane visuals and auditory hallucinations aren't what did it. It was the simple fact that I am with reckless individuals who do nothing but make stupid choices, that I am sleep deprived, and that I am too fucked up to leave. I know I'm not going into detail much, but I assure you, every second was painful and full of paranoia, guilt, confusion, and a concoction of other feelings. And when you are in this state, you feel every single second go by. I tell Steve that I wanted this to end. He hands me a Xanax in response, to which I immediately took without a pause for consideration. I immediately forgot about the Xanax I took, so I tell him that I want this to end. You could probably see where I'm going with this. And this repeated one more time, putting my total consumption to 3 bars. I know this sounds ludicrous, but acid makes my short-term memory almost non-existent sometimes. After that, I proceeded to drink a 40-ounce Miller Lite, and my night became a series of flashing images of me coming in and out of consciousness. I do have one memory of Steve and I making out, and pulling away in absolute horror. To be honest, I find this kind of funny after some time passed. I woke up about a solid 24 hours later, still barred out. I saw my girlfriend at the time had called me about 15 times trying to reach me. I shrugged it off and drove home, still absolutely barred out. I don't remember the drive at all, but I made it back to my bed safe and sound and slept for another day. Safe to say, I'm grateful to have survived. And the moral of the story is that you need to be prepared in every aspect to minimize the potential for a bad trip. One thing can easily lead to another, causing you to lose control of yourself. Respect all substances, and respect yourself. Hit that like button if you're enjoying this video, and subscribe if you're new. Comment down below your craziest acid trip. I know I've had some crazy ones. No bad ones yet though, thank God. Also turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any new upload. And I'm also very active on my Instagram, @TheTripKeeper, so go follow me on there if you haven't already. Alright, let's move on to the next story. Before I begin, I want everyone to know you're about to hear a story about me being broken by LSD and never being the same again. This features some really ugly and messed up thinking. If you're sensitive to suicidal thoughts brought on by existential thinking, please use discretion when hearing this story. It was my 24th birthday, and me and my 2 good friends from Colorado, we'll call them H and M, were planning on taking an LSD trip together out in nature to celebrate my birthday. I've taken psychedelics about 6 times by this point, LSD 2 times at low doses, and psilocybin mushrooms 4 times at normal doses, 2 to 3 grams, along with hundreds of microdoses of both over a couple of years. Both my friends had taken mushrooms 2 times, and I was the one that introduced them to it, and guided them both of those times. This trip, in a sense, was a way for them to return the favor. They've told me that when I guided them through it changed their lives, which I strongly believe because both times they ended up crying tears of joy and coming to profound realizations in my arms. They had originally planned on providing me with LSD from their dealer, but he only had 2 tabs left, and I was in Utah at the time and had to source some LSD about 3 days before I was supposed to fly out to Colorado. I pulled my resources together, and I found an acquaintance that was able to sell me 5 gel tabs. The dealer claimed to have dripped the LSD onto each tab individually and warned me that this was strong stuff. I of course didn't really believe the typical "this is strong stuff" line. Big mistake. I was more interested in making sure it was real LSD. I tested them both, which showed that it indeed was the real stuff. I hid the tabs in my Rubik's Cube to get past the TSA, which set a very stressful tone for the events that were about to occur. We got an early start on the day and hiked out to a place called Walker Ranch. At about 7 in the morning, we reached our secluded spot by the river, cheered our tabs, and placed them under our tongues. At about 45 minutes in, I started to notice I was already higher than I've ever been with psychedelics. My fingers were elongating and contracting, and as the trees swayed in the breeze, I noticed the fractal distortions were moving along with them. Almost as if the trees themselves were distorted, instead of the trees moving through a distorted space. When I noticed these two things, this knocked down the first domino in a long chain leading to lasting insanity. The visuals got wackier and wackier for the next hour. The boulders seemed to behave more like marshmallows covered in squiggly black and purple lines that had intricate morphing patterns. As my mind started to unwind from the sheer amount of data it was exposed to, the focus of the trip suddenly went all psychological. I started to question things that normally aren't healthy to question. I started to question whether my friends were really my friends. I questioned whether I'd been mentally disabled my whole life and everyone around me was just acting to make me feel better. I started to wonder if my memories were real or if I'd been stuck on that beach and had been hallucinating my whole life just while sitting there. When the peak hit, the LSD got me to the point I started to seriously ponder if the body I was in was a sick, fucked up joke, simply a way for consciousness to maximize hurting me by letting me experience love and kindness, only to watch it slowly rot, age, and die. Almost like being given the most wonderful gift as a child, only to be raped and slowly killed afterward by an insane, hateful god. When I was being assaulted by these really dark thoughts, I looked up at the sky, and all the beauty of the visuals had gone. The colors were dim, and the shapes and outlines of objects looked sharper like knives and were more menacing. I could hear the space around me laughing at me, almost like it's been waiting for me to figure out the horrible truth of life. Physically, I'd been pacing back and forth along the bank of the river, trying my best to keep it together. I wasn't saying or doing much out of the ordinary, but as soon as that thought train hit me, something inside me broke, and it broke deeply. I put my hands to my head and collapsed to the ground, screaming like I was possessed. I screamed and thrashed on the ground, kicking up dirt and leaves. My friends rushed over to try and help me. They were completely shocked and terrified at how quickly I went from quiet to psychotic. I don't remember this, but they asked me what was wrong, and I just screamed louder. This lasted for about a half an hour. My vocal cords were wrecked from screaming, and I had bit my tongue and was spitting up blood by the end of it. The hike down the trail and the drive off the mountain were very emotionally flat. I was in a traumatized daze, and my friends were a little scared after what happened. They said the tabs they took were duds, which given the circumstances was ideal, because I needed to be around sober people for the remainder of the trip. I apologized to my friends for putting them through that. They said it was all good, and that they were glad to, at the very least, be there for me. The real issues started happening after this trip. Growing up as a kid and my whole life leading up to this point, I was always quick to smile and had a generally positive and upbeat attitude about life. I was never anxious about anything. I now have a hard time feeling joy and don't really smile when I'm alone. I've consistently had 1 to 2 panic attacks a month since this happened in August of 2020. Each panic attack, my heart is pounding, and I can't catch a breath for about a minute. My friends and family have asked me a few times if I've been okay lately, because they say I've been acting a little differently. I'm fine, I say, but I know I got fucked up on the inside from this experience. I have a few of the classical symptoms of PTSD. I have recurrent memories of what happened, reliving the traumatic event as if it were happening again in flashbacks. I've even had upsetting dreams or nightmares about it. I avoid drinking alcohol and smoking weed because it shifts my mind into an altered non-sober state and it reminds me of this event. This is clearly some mental illness that I was unaware of that was brought up to the surface by a strong dose of psychedelics. Experiences like mine are rare and are unlikely to happen to you. All I ask is that you tread carefully and maybe really try to get to know yourself before taking a psychedelic. I'm getting help from a therapist to help deprogram this awful way of looking at life from my head, and it is starting to help. Please, be careful. This has to be one of my most intense acid experiences. I took 12 220 microgram acid tabs in total and experienced whatever the hell I experienced. It didn't take long for the tabs to kick in upon dropping, maybe 30 minutes. The first sign that I was fucked was when, around 45 minutes in, my body felt like it split in half in the chair I was sitting in. When I say this, I mean it felt like my soul rose into the air and my spirit fell to the ground, straight through my chair. There was no middle part of my being. I was only two halves that couldn't make a whole. As I barely have time to notice this happening, I am reformed and everything feels different now. I don't even remember what friends I had up that night, but one guy sticks out in my mind. I'll call him Tree because he was taller than me and I'm 6'5". My vision soon became just a pure trip. I can't remember how long it took to be blasted off into outer space, but it wasn't long. Tree was trying to talk to me, but it just sounded like he was speaking some foreign language I've never heard before. He had the appearance of some kind of alien entity thing that I can barely even begin to recall the true appearance of because it was so complex. I began trying to tell him I was tripping balls, and then, that's when it happened. The whole room flipped upside down. The wall I was facing was now the floor from my perspective, and I felt like I could fall out of my chair at any time. The futon that Tree was sitting on looked like it was bolted to the now wall I was sitting on. This is where I began to lose memory. I don't remember what was said, done, or even going to bed that night, or day, or whenever the hell I went to sleep. I do recall one vivid thing from some time in the trip, however. I remember having double vision, not seeing double, but having two different things I was seeing at the same time. I saw the room and all the trippiness of it, but I also saw outside the room. We were floating in this giant empty void of space, and that's when I had a theory that came to mind that has always stuck with me ever since this trip. What if everything we perceive in the world is just generated for us as we view it? What if this world is just generating as we perceive it? That's why when you take substances such as LSD, DMT, etc., you begin to create your own universe and world that only you can see. It makes me think, is the true world just something that we make up in our minds? Well anyways, that's my story. I'm writing this sleep deprived, so I don't know if anything makes sense or if it sounds good. Just stay safe out there.